Willem, 1947 to 1963. He was my friend, a good friend who knew how to laugh and how to listen. Unlike most of the youth in our church who attended the Christian high school in Hamilton, we went to public high schools, a fact that both set us apart and drew us together. Dutch immigrants generally had big families back then, so there were lots of children and youth in our church, organized into many groups. We were members of the Junior Youth Group, whose weekly Friday evening meetings featured a mix of fun and sober thinking. At one point, I had admitted to Willem, who was a confident public speaker, that having to take my turn at presenting an essay on some deep biblical or political subject was one of the great trials of my life. He'd laughed and said, "That's why we made a good team. He hated writing, and I hated public speaking. Which is a shame," he added, grinning, "because you can sure preach." I didn't know then that he'd remember that conversation and save me from what would undoubtedly have been the most spectacular humiliation of my young life. It was spring, and our church's turn to host the annual Junior Youth Jamboree, to which all the surrounding church groups were invited. We were expected to present the primary essay and lead the follow-up discussion. Always fearlessly ready to pontificate on subjects I really knew very little about, an essay I had presented earlier in the year on the dangers of communism was selected. I was utterly horrified. How would I survive speaking in front of a few hundred intimidating teenagers if I could barely survive reading an essay under the mocking judgment of 20 or so peers? Panic took hold of me as I visualized myself dissolving into a puddle of tearful, red-faced embarrassment in front of a laughing audience. But then dear Willem came to the rescue. "Never mind," he said. "Give me that essay so I can practice it a few times. Then tell him you've got a sore throat and can't read, and I'll volunteer to do it for you." That's exactly what happened. It wasn't even a lie, since in my panic-ridden state, I would have been unable to utter a word. Later, grinning in unholy glee, we congratulated each other on the success of the plan. I assured Willem in my usual dramatic fashion that he was an awesome friend. He'd saved me from death by humiliation, and I'd be eternally grateful for his kindness. Then came July 10th, 1963. It was the day Willem died, killed when the John Deere tractor he was driving across the steep slope of a hayfield in his hurry to get to the baseball game flipped over and pinned him under its massive fenders, crushing the life out of him. It was the day, the evening actually, when life took a sharp turn around the bend of a road I hadn't even known existed, and it was never quite the same again. It was my first experience of death, my first encounter with the bewildering pain of grief. His parents, already worn down by the many bitter experiences life had dealt them, grew old before my astonished eyes. Supported by their daughter and the church family, they buried their dreams along with their only son, and then faded away like antique pictures exposed to too much light. Life moves on, and everyone moves on with it. But the big, life-changing things that happen don't disappear. They become part of who we are, carried with us forever and occasionally flashing upon the screens of our minds as though they occurred just yesterday. That's what happened to me almost 15 years later when I was visiting Ontario for the first time since my father's death. Perhaps it was the harsh reality of Dad's absence that brought my old friend Willem so clearly to mind. As I sat outside on the grass, watching the sun go down behind the woods to the west, while swiping absent-mindedly at the hordes of mosquitoes out for their evening feed, I thought about that terrible day when I was 16 years old. Without any real volition on my part, a poem of sorts emerged full-blown out of my bleak thoughts, a poem about the fine boy who was my good friend and who would have grown into a good man. You were young. We were all young then, as with a horrible excitement the word flashed among us. Have you heard? He's dead. Accident. How awful. There would be no pilot's wings for you, no fertile farm well tilled producing in abundance, not yours any longer to decide whether to soar through wide blue skies or to root your life in the good earth. Not yours to know if a dear friendship would bloom into something richer, fuller. That friendship must forever be a gently pressed and dried forget-me-not, tucked carefully in memory's pages. My friend, I think of you sometimes and wonder, is it better so, not to wonder or to decide? I know I wouldn't choose to miss the gifts of joy and pain that life has brought me, the beauty and the mystery of the world we live in. When God takes back the gift of life, unused, when it seems good to him to call a halt before the race is run, what do we say? Is it better so? The burned-out woods stood stark and black against the setting sun that awful night. Grim, fire-blackened skeletons reaching dead arms to the orange and rose and blood-tinged sky. Beauty, life, reduced to ashes. I see those woods again tonight, the silhouette so changed. Now it stands soft, green, alive, etched against a rosy sky by a master painter. Beauty, life from ashes. How clearly you must see, my friend, in the light that shines about you now. How dark the glass we, living, see through dimly.